They arrested me for eating. I killed an elk because I was hungry, and they put me in a cage for it. 9 days later, 4 men were dead, and I was lying on a bank floor with a hole I put in my own chest. I was 26 years old. I need to tell you how that happened. Not the way the newspapers told it. Not the way that movie told it 30 years later. The way it actually happened, from the inside, from a man who was there for every second of it because it was his life, and then it was his death. My name is Earl Durand, 26 years old, 10 years living in the Absaroka Range of northwest Wyoming, alone, by choice, in country that killed men who knew what they were doing. The nearest town was Powell. 2 days walking in good weather. 4 days in March when the snow was chest deep and the temperature was 40 below and the wind came off those peaks like it had a personal grievance against anything warm-blooded. The year was 1939. There was a war starting in Europe, but we did not know that yet. There were telephones in town, but the nearest one to my country was 2 mountain passes and a river crossing away. If something happened to you in the Absarokas in winter, nobody was coming. Nobody would know. You would lie where you fell, and the snow would cover you, and in spring the bears would find what was left. This is the story of 9 days in March, and the 10 years before them that made those 9 days inevitable. March 1939. I came down to my father's ranch on Marquette Creek to see him. I had been up high for most of the winter, and I was lean and my clothes were more hide than cloth, and I imagine I looked rough. I came down through the pasture the way I always did, and my father was on the porch the way he always was. Walt Durand, rancher, respected man in the county. He watched me come in and did not say anything. We ate supper. He looked older than the last time. His hands on the table were thick and cracked, and he moved slower when he got up from his chair. I noticed. I did not say anything. We were not men for many words. I slept in my old bed. The mattress felt wrong, too soft, the ceiling too close, the walls too near. I lay there in the dark and I felt the weight on my chest, the same weight I had felt in every room I had ever been in that had a door that closed, the same weight from classrooms and kitchens and any building where the walls pressed in. I looked at the ceiling and I listened to my father breathing down the hall, and I waited for morning. In the morning they came. 2 game wardens, a deputy. They came up the road in a truck and parked in the yard, and they had badges and a warrant and a piece of paper that said Earl Durand was under arrest for the unlawful killing of elk out of season. My father came out on the porch. I saw his face. He knew. Whether someone had told him or whether he just sensed it the way a rancher senses weather, I do not know. But he knew. And there was something in his eyes I cannot describe, except to say it was the look of a man asking his son to please this one time, do the thing that will not make everything worse. I let them put the handcuffs on. They drove me to Cody, to the Park County Jail. They walked me inside and put me in a cell and closed the door, and the lock clicked, and that was the sound that changed everything. 8 feet by 6, a cot, a toilet, a small window with bars. The air was stale and warm and smelled like disinfectant and other men. I sat on that cot for 6 hours, and something happened inside me that was not a thought and not a decision. Something lower than that. Something in the body. My hands started to shake. My jaw clenched so tight I could hear my teeth creak. My skin felt like it was too tight for my body, like something inside me was pressing outward against it. I was an animal in a trap. I do not say that to be dramatic. I say it because that is exactly what it was. 10 years I had slept under stars and under rock and under snow, and none of those things had walls. None of those things had locks. The mountains were hard, but they were open, and you could always move, and there was always a direction that was not blocked. This room had no direction. Every direction was a wall. By midnight, I knew I was leaving, not because I decided it, because my body decided it, the way a trapped coyote chews through its own leg. It is not a choice. It is what the animal does because the alternative is dying in the trap. I need to go back now. Before I tell you what happened next, you need to know what I was, not who. What? I was wrong from the start. Not bad. Wrong. Wrong for kitchens and classrooms and towns. There was a weight I got on my chest sitting in a room with walls that I did not have a word for until I was old enough to stop looking for one. The walls pressed in, not in my head, in my ribs. I would look out the window at the Absarokas and the weight would ease and the teacher would call my name and the weight would come back harder. I once told a boy at school that I had watched a mountain lion eat a rabbit from 30 yards and that the sound the rabbit made was the most honest sound I had ever heard. He looked at me like I had said something wrong. Maybe I had. I did not know then, and I do not know now. By 14, I had killed my first elk alone, a cow elk in a meadow above the ranch at dawn. I gutted her where she fell, and I remember the steam coming off the body cavity in the cold air. Iron and grass and something warm and alive that was becoming something else right there under my hands. I cut the liver out and ate a piece of it raw, kneeling in the snow. It was hot and slippery and tasted like blood and metal, and I thought, this is right. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. By 16, I was spending more time in the mountains than at the ranch. By 18, the ranch was just a place I stopped on my way back up. My father would see me come down through the pasture with a pack on my back and meat on my shoulders, and he would stand on the porch and watch me and not say anything. In the morning, I would be gone. I took almost nothing with me. A 30-06 rifle that was my life. I kept it cleaner than I kept myself. A knife with an 8-inch blade, a fire steel, ammunition, a small bag of salt. That was everything. I wore wool and leather, and later I wore hides I made myself. I looked like something from 100 years earlier, and I did not care. Clothing is insulation. Insulation is survival. Fashion is for people who are warm enough to have opinions. The first winter alone almost killed me. November 1931. I was 18. I had found a rock overhang on the North Fork of the Shoshone drainage. Good shelter, blocked the wind on 3 sides. I had a fire ring built and a stack of deadfall, and I thought I was ready. I was not ready. The temperature dropped to 30 below on the 3rd night. At 30 below, the air hurts going in. It burns the inside of your nose and your throat, and if you breathe through your mouth, your teeth ache. I had a fire, but the wind found a seam in my shelter, and the fire was not enough. I lay under 2 elk hides, and I shook, not trembling, shaking, the kind where your muscles burn calories faster than you can replace them. I got up in the dark and fed the fire until it was roaring and crouched over it so close my leather pants started to smoke. Heat on my face and chest, back still freezing. That is the thing about cold that people who have not lived in it do not understand. You cannot get warm. You can get one side warm and the other side is still dying. You rotate like meat on a spit all night, and by morning you have not slept and the cold is still there. Day 4. I could not feel my toes. I pulled off my boots and looked at them. The 2 smallest toes on my left foot were white, not pink, not red, white, like candle wax. I knew what that meant. I rubbed them, held them against my stomach, put them near the fire. 2 hours before the feeling came back, and when it did, I wished it had not, like someone driving nails into the ends of my toes with a hammer. I said a word I will not repeat. I said it several times. Then I got up and fixed the shelter, cut boughs and packed them into the wind gap, piled snow on the outside for insulation, killed a pine marten and used the hide to wrap my feet inside my boots. By the 5th night, the shelter held. The fire held. My toes were swollen and purple, but they were still attached, and they still worked. That was my education. Not a classroom, not a teacher, just cold that wanted to kill me, and the question of whether I was smart enough and tough enough to stop it. I was, barely. The mountains taught me the way a hard father teaches a son he loves. They hit me and I either learned the lesson or I died. I learned that shelter matters more than food. You can go hungry for days. You cannot go cold for a night at 40 below. I learned that a fire is not a luxury. I got to where I could start a fire in a snowstorm with wet hands and a fire steel in under 4 minutes. I practiced it the way another man might practice a musical instrument. I learned where the elk went in winter, down into the valleys, into the thick timber where the snow was not as deep and the wind could not reach them. I followed them. I lived where they lived. I ate what they gave me. And that is the part that became the problem. I killed elk to eat. I killed deer to eat. I killed bighorn sheep to eat. I did not kill for sport. I did not kill for trophies. I used the meat and the hides and the bones for tools and the sinew for cordage. I used everything because everything mattered when you had nothing. But there were laws. Game laws, seasons, limits, tags you were supposed to buy from a man in a building in town. Rules that said you could kill an elk in October but not in January. Rules that said you needed a piece of paper to eat. I understood those laws existed for good reasons. I am not stupid. If every man in Wyoming killed elk whenever he wanted, there would be no elk left. I understood the principle. But I was not every man in Wyoming. I was one man, living alone, in mountains where nobody else lived, killing one animal at a time to feed one person. I was not hunting. I was eating. There is a difference. And the law did not recognize that difference. The game wardens knew about me. They found my camps after I moved on, found bones and hides. They knew someone was poaching, and they knew it was me, and they could not catch me because I knew those mountains better than any man alive, and I could cover 50 miles in a day through country that would stop a horse. They tried, sent men up after me, and I watched them from the ridgelines, watched them struggle through snow I walked on top of, watched them give up after 3 or 4 days and go back to town where it was warm. They were patient, more patient than I expected. They waited for me to come down. Now I need to take you back to that jail cell. March 16th, morning. Less than 24 hours since they locked me in. A deputy came to check on me. He was not a big man. He had the keys on his belt and he had a routine, and his routine had a gap in it, and I had been watching for that gap for 12 hours. He opened the cell door to bring me breakfast, a tray, coffee and bread. He was looking at the tray and not at me. I came off that cot fast. I hit him once, hard, in the jaw. He went sideways into the door frame and the tray went everywhere and the coffee cup broke on the floor. He was not out, but he was not thinking clearly. I grabbed the keys off his belt. My hands were shaking, but they worked. I got past him and into the hallway, and there was a rack on the wall with firearms. I took a rifle. I took ammunition. I went out the door and the cold hit my face and I could smell pine on the wind from the mountains. I ran west toward the Absarokas, toward the only place I had ever felt right, through snow and timber the way a man runs when everything behind him is a cage and everything in front of him is open country. For about 3 hours I was free, and it was the cleanest feeling I had ever had. Then I heard them coming. They were organized fast. Posse, deputies, volunteers, men on horses, men on foot, men with rifles who knew the lower country and thought they knew the upper country. They came after me in numbers because I had assaulted a deputy and stolen weapons. And that changed everything from a game violation to something much worse. I went high, into the deep timber, into the snow, into the country I knew, and they did not. 50 miles that first day, through drifts that were chest high in places, over ridges where the wind nearly took me off my feet. I did not stop until dark, and when I stopped, I dug into a snowbank and pulled snow over myself and lay there in the dark, and my breath melted a little cave in front of my face, and I slept. I slept well. The first good sleep since the jail. Day 2. I could hear them below me, voices carrying up through the timber, the sound of horses in snow, not close, but coming. I kept moving, up, always up, into the country where horses could not follow and men who were not me could not keep pace. I ate snow for water. I had no food. I had the rifle and the ammunition and the clothes on my back. Day 3. I killed a rabbit with a rock. I did not want to fire the rifle because the sound would tell them where I was. Found the rabbit in a thicket, moved slow, threw a stone the size of my fist, hit it clean. I ate it raw. The meat was cold within minutes in that air, but I ate it all, cracked the bones, and sucked the marrow. That is where I was by day 3. eating raw rabbit in a snowfield and cracking bones with my teeth. And I was freer than I had been in that jail cell, and I would have done it for a year if they had let me. They did not let me. More men now. I could see them from the high ridges. Dozens spread across the lower timber. And then I heard something I did not expect, an engine, above me. I looked up and there was an airplane, a small plane circling over the mountains, searching. They had brought an airplane to find one man. I want to tell you what that felt like. Not the fear, the insult. I had lived in those mountains for 10 years, and I had never bothered anyone. I had eaten what the land provided. I had not stolen. I had not fought. I had asked for nothing. And now there were 100 men in an airplane hunting me because I had killed an elk and refused to stay in a cage. Something hardened inside me that day. Something that had been flexible went rigid. I cannot tell you exactly when it happened. But by the time the sun went down on day 3, I was not the same man who had walked out of that jail. The killing started on day 4. I need to tell this straight. No excuses. No reasons that make it clean. Because it was not clean. A group from the posse came up through a drainage I knew well. I was above them in the rocks. 2 men out front. The one in the lead was Deputy Chuck Lewis. I did not know his name then. I learned it later. They were coming up through the trees carrying rifles, and they were hunting me. The way I hunted elk, working the timber, reading sign, coming to kill me or capture me, and I was not going to be captured again. I fired from above. The first round hit Chuck Lewis, and he went down. The second man, Orville Linford, I shot him too. He went down. 2 men, dead in the snow, because of me. I sat behind the rock where I had fired from, and I looked at the rifle in my hands, and my hands were not shaking anymore. They had been shaking for 3 days, and now they were steady. And that should have scared me more than anything else, but it did not. I moved, left them where they fell, and went higher, and the mountains took me in the way they always had, and I disappeared into the timber and the snow and the rock. Below me I could hear shouting, then silence, then more shouting. 2 families got the worst news of their lives that day. Because of me. I need to say that plain. 2 women lost their husbands. Children lost their fathers. Because I decided that my freedom was worth more than their lives. I believed it at the time. The way a drowning man believes the air above the water is the only thing that matters. You do not think about who else needs the air. You just reach for it. The manhunt doubled, then tripled. National Guard came in, more airplanes, over 100 men in those mountains, all looking for one person. I was a ghost. I knew every drainage, every ridge, every cave and game trail in that country. I had walked it for 10 years in every season. They could bring 1,000 men, and they would not find me unless I wanted to be found. But I was running out of ammunition. That was the problem. Not food, not cold, not the men, ammunition. Every round I had was a round I had taken from the jail, and I had used rounds and there would be no more. When the ammunition was gone, the rifle was a club, and a club was not going to keep 100 men away. I also had not eaten properly in days. The rabbit on day 3, snow for water, nothing else. My body was consuming itself. I could feel it, the muscles going first, then the thinking slowing down. My hands still worked, but they worked slower. My eyes still saw, but they tired faster. Physical cost inventory, 6 days in. Hands, functional but slow. Feet, old frostbite scars aching in the cold. Ribs visible through the skin, weight dropping fast. Mind, the edges blurring. Plans that felt solid but were built on sand. I thought about staying up there, going deeper, higher, into the country where nobody would follow. Living off whatever I could catch with my hands, dying up there if it came to it, dying free. I almost did it. I want you to know that. I almost stayed, and if I had, 2 more men would be alive today, and my name would mean something different than it does. But I did not. I came down, March 24th, 9 days after they arrested me. I came down because my body was failing, and I needed supplies and ammunition, and there was a thought in my head that was not entirely rational. I thought I could resupply and disappear. I was not thinking clearly. Hunger and cold and 6 days of running will do that. The edges of your thinking blur. The plans you make feel solid, but they are built on nothing. I came down to Powell, my town, the town where people knew my name and my father's name. I went to the First National Bank. I need to slow down here, because it happened fast, and none of it was what I intended, and all of it was my fault. I walked into that bank with a rifle. I do not know exactly what I thought I was going to do. Get money, get out, get back to the mountains. That was the plan as much as there was a plan. It was the plan of a starving man whose mind was not working right. There were people in that bank, tellers, customers, ordinary people having an ordinary Friday. And I walked in carrying a rifle, and everything changed for everyone in that room. Johnny Gothrop was behind the counter, young man, working a regular job in a small town. He was looking at me, and his face had that expression I recognized. Fear, but more than that, confusion. The look of a person who cannot make sense of what is happening. I shot him. I cannot tell you exactly why. Whether he moved wrong, or I thought he was reaching for something, or whether the animal inside me that had been running for 6 days was so far past reason that it did not need a reason anymore. I shot him and he died. Tipton Cox, another man, another name I did not know. He was trying to do something brave, or trying to get away, or trying to help someone else. I shot him too. He died. 2 more men, 2 more families broken, because of an elk and a cage and a mind that had gone past the place where it could come back. I stood in that bank with 4 men dead because of me, and the sound of shouting outside, and I knew it was over. The way you know whether when you have lived outside long enough. The pressure changes, the air changes, you know, no way back to the mountains, not now, not ever again. I thought about my father, standing on the porch, watching me come down through the pasture, the look on his face that was not anger but something worse. I thought about the mountains, the way the light hit the peaks at dawn, the way the snow sounded under my feet when it was cold enough. That particular silence that is not silence at all, but the sound of wind and water and your own blood and nothing else. Every direction was a wall. I put the rifle to my chest, and I pulled the trigger. Lewis, Linford, Gothrop, Cox, 4 names. I cannot make that right. A man kills another man, and there is no sentence he can speak afterwards that repairs the whole. Not in this life. My father buried me. Walt Durand, a man who had done everything right his whole life. He buried his son quietly, and the town let him, and that was the closest thing to mercy anyone showed my family. I do not know what he said, standing at my grave. He was not a man for many words. Neither was I. I want to tell you one more thing. Then I am done. There was a morning in my 2nd year up there. I was 19. I came over a ridge at first light, and below me in a meadow there were 200 elk, cows and calves, and a few bulls still carrying antlers. They were steaming in the cold. The whole meadow was white with frost, and the elk were dark against it, and the steam from their breath rose up and mixed together into a low fog that hung over them like a second sky. I sat on that ridge and I watched them for an hour. I did not hunt, I did not move, I just watched. And in that hour, I felt something I have never felt before or since. Not happiness exactly, something simpler. The feeling of being a creature among creatures in a place that was made for creatures. The feeling of being exactly where you belong. Some of you know what I mean. You have stood somewhere at dawn, a ridgeline, a riverbank, a field, and felt the world click into place around you like a bolt sliding home. And then you went back to your life, and the click went away, and you spent years trying to hear it again. The mountains do not care. They just exist. And if you are strong enough and humble enough, they will let you exist alongside them. For 10 years they let me. Then they put me in a cage, and I became something else. There was another man I heard about once. A trapper. Different century, different mountains. A bear got hold of him, and the men he was with left him for dead. He crawled 200 miles on a broken leg to find them. His story makes mine look small. Maybe someone will tell it. My name is Earl Durand. I was 26 years old. I lived in the mountains because the mountains were the only place that made sense. I died on a bank floor in a town I never wanted to be in. March 1939, Powell, Wyoming. A Friday. The mountains are still there.